Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of Walk in Faith. We're back in the Opera House in the Emmaus Center, and today I'm sitting down with Martin Sheen to discuss The Way. Martin, it's a pleasure to sit down with you again.
It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
You know, you and I spoke off camera. It was probably about 8 years ago. It was right before World Youth Day. I know you were headed out to Brazil, I think, at that time. And I was in your yard with your brother, and your sister was there as well. We were talking about the way, we were talking about the pilgrimage, and that conversation had such an impact on my life. You spoke a lot about your personal journey of faith. But now we're here again discussing the way for almost its 10th anniversary. Why did you decide to release this film again?
The film, when it first opened 10 years ago, did not enjoy a great commercial success at the time, but it did have kind of an underground personal effect on a lot of people, so much so that it gathered steam and it became like an underground energy force. And as a result, many thousands of Americans and Canadian pilgrims particularly started going on the pilgrimage, inspired by the film. Many of them had never heard of it. Gradually, it spread all over the world, and it's in many different languages. It's played on Netflix for a time, and then it's been streaming. And recently, it came back to us. We own the film now. It was a family adventure. You know, we raised our own funds and contributed our own financial investment, and we made it on our own. We were lucky enough to get back our investment, but a lot of people saw the film and we weren't even aware that it was doing so well out there. Now, Emilio set up a website, and people began to correspond with him and say how much it inspired and changed their lives. And so we thought, since the end of the pandemic, so many people were shut in, there was very little travel, least of all pilgrimages. And so we thought this is an opportune time to give people a second look at this film and a re-release. And so far, it's been extraordinary. You know, we went up to see Rick Steves a few weeks ago in Seattle, and he's a great fan of the film and the Camino. He did a story on PBS on the Camino. So he did an interview with us that's going to be aired at the end of the presentation May 16th, and all the theaters across the United States. I think there's 700 theaters. It's been very well received so far. And as I say, at the end of the screening on May 16th, you'll see this interview that we did with Rick Steves about Camino, about family, about how we made the film and why, and the effect the film has had on so many people. So I think it's an opportune time, and I'm very excited about it. There's nothing like it out there. And so I think that people will rediscover it. They'll be seeing it on the big screen for the first time in 10 years. You know, most people that have seen it on just about the size that you and I are right now. I'm looking forward to seeing that vast expanse of the beautiful countryside in northern Spain, all the way from the French Pyrenees to Galicia and the cathedral at Santiago de Compostela. And so I'm very excited about this, and that's why you and I are talking. We're doing as much publicity and interviews as we can to inspire people to have at it and go and be surprised and inspired and hopefully get the film re-released on a regular basis.
No, you said a lot of important things, and for me too. I watched it at home on a small screen, and I remember how that film impacted my life. But then when I watched it again, it had a different impact because I was in a different sort of season of my life. The one part that stuck out so much for me in this time watching it was the father's blessing in the beginning of the film. And I thought about that because I have a 7-year-old son, and at the time I was just getting married, and so the film had a different impact. But to see it now, and I thought a lot about that moment in the car where you talk about the father's blessing. And I said to myself how that made me reflect on my son and how important it is to tell our children or our loved ones how much we love them. Because not every child or every person gets that blessing, and how important it is to get that blessing from our Heavenly Father, but also to let people know how much we love them. So it impacted me completely different watching this film again.
Well, it's personal. You know, many people, whether they're Catholic or not, or it touches the deepest part of their humanity, and it's deeply personal, and it's about family, and it's about knowing that we're loved. And I think that God expresses his love for us in a deeply personal way, in a very practical way, through each other, and particularly parents who can bless their children, and children that can bless their parents. If we are able to see the very best part and the very neediest part in each other, we see it in ourselves, we reflect it in each other, and that's God telling us how much we are loved and cherished and how much we are needed by each other. We can't sustain our lives without each other.
How did this film from 10 years ago to now, how have you changed as a person spiritually from when you filmed this over 10 years ago to now? How have you changed?
Well, it's really an amazing journey, because I'm still so inspired by the reaction to it. There's so many, literally hundreds of thousands of people have seen it on the internet or streaming or Netflix, or have bought the DVD and seen it in their homes in languages all across the world. And they have responded, many of them, to Emilio's website, The Way the Movie, and they give their thoughts on their journey. Many of them, while they're on the journey, have emailed Emilio or taken FaceTime with the website to express where they are and how they were inspired by the way, and how the way is celebrated along the way. I haven't been on the Camino since we did the film in 2009 and 10, but I understand that some of the sites have become tourist attractions, where people have put markers up and said that this scene in the film was shot here, and sometimes they have pictures and descriptions of the scene and how inspired they were. And it's all across the Camino, all the way to Santiago from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in the French Pyrenees. So it's been an inspiration, and it confirmed all the reasons we did it, and it nurtures us to do that kind of work again, to do the things that we love the most, that inspire us, that give us the most satisfaction. There's nothing I've done in my career that is more satisfying than The Way. It's been an extremely satisfying experience to receive the response of the film. It's so deeply personal. And so it's like, I sometimes I'll see little snippets of it. In the last weeks that we've been doing publicity, some folks have run scenes, and I'm reminded of how, when, where, and we filmed those scenes, and how much a part of my own personal spirituality is wrapped up in those scenes, and how important they are, and how they reflect, and what a joy it is to celebrate it again, and hopefully maybe I shouldn't mention it right now, but we're hoping to create an initiative for part 2. So that's already in the works.
Wow.
So we'll see where it lands. But if the way does well on this current adventure, 700 theaters across the United States on the evening of May 16th, if it inspires, the film comes back in theaters or gets revitalized on the internet or Netflix or wherever, we may be inspired to do and be able to do part 2.
Well, I will be praying for that. I was at Santiago de Compostela when the pilgrims came, and I remember interviewing them and just listening to their story and their journey. And Jim Caviezel told me why he did the pilgrimage, the Camino, and to hear these stories, I mean, that's something that I really hope to do with my son. When I first saw the film, like I said, I wanted to do it. I was interested in doing it by myself for different reasons. And now I told my son Mario, I said, when you're a a little bit older, we're going to do it together, because I was inspired by you. You know, even though like Emilio's only in the film certain parts, but you guys were together, that bond. I mean, that's something that, you know, I want as well. I mean, that film is the way it impacted me on so many levels. I believe it'll do the same to so many people. You know, you might not know about it, but I mean, it really has impacted a lot.
That's very inspiring to me. I appreciate your sharing that. I had no idea that the film had connected with you and now your son as well. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do the Camino again, but if we get a chance to do part 2, that would be a revelation as well. But I just can't get over the number of people and the powerful effect it's had on so many lives. So personal, so deeply transformative. That wasn't the intention as we were doing. We just wanted to make an honest film, and we wanted to touch on a deeply personal level that we believed as a family, as a father and son particularly, but the whole family was involved in the film. You know, as I say, there's nothing that I've ever done in my life professionally that gave me such satisfaction. The film has so many levels of spiritual nourishment for me and for everyone involved in the film. It just meant so much. There's so many moments in the film that just take my breath away. How Emilio constructed the film and the choices he made. And one in particular that stands out is when they reach the cathedral, they all go kind of in their separate ways to find a spot where they can be themselves or reflect on their journey. And the one guy that you'd least expect would fall to his knees in worship and walk on his knees to the image of St. James and place his hand where centuries of pilgrims had placed their hands and it marked into the stone. And Emilio did that specifically. It was like saying that when we're alone, when we're faced with our own mortality, our own humanity, our own spirituality, and we embrace that in deeply personal ways, it's between us and our Creator, even if we're not religiously inclined, but our humanity, where we connect with the mystery of what it means to be human. And that moment where he falls to his knees is so deeply moving. Even thinking about it, I get welled up. I just feel it was so miraculous, that moment, and that Emilio chose that guy of all of us to do that act at that time in that place. And it to see it on film is like, it comes at you like it's like a splash of holy water, you know, like when sometimes you're in the back of the pew and just recently, like during the Easter time, we get the blessing. You know, it's like, it's like they seek you out. Bam, you need a blessing. You know. And
yeah, whenever you're looking away.
Like, yeah. Sorry, I'm going on and on.
No. This is fascinating.
I'm still deeply moved by it.
No, and so when we were together, hopefully you remember this, because in the film too, right? Your character struggles with faith. And you told me a story which I told Jim about, and I actually reflected on it a lot. It was when I think you were in Paris, right? And you were sort of struggling, and Terry approached you, and he sort of brought you back. Could you share that story with me again?
Yeah. Well, I had, I was raised Catholic, and like a lot of young men in our business, when you get to be, on your own and you have a little success, you think that you've got it in hand. And so I kind of faded from the faith. Every now and then I'd dabble here and there. It was odd because it was all happening during the Second Vatican Council, and I was not aware of the changes that were made till afterwards. So I was a sometimes Catholic, as it were. We were married in the church. The children were all baptized, but I did not practice very much, and I didn't insist that the children do either. And my wife is non-Catholic, so it didn't matter to her. So I was kind of on my own. And then, in fact, Emilio and I went to India in 1981 for about 6 weeks. I did a role on Gandhi, and I had really some earth-shattering moments in India, viewing the horrible poverty there, and yet the humanity and the miraculous kind of energy that exists in that country on all levels. And I just had to reflect on where I was in my life, in my career, with my family, with myself. And so I came home from India deeply disturbed by what I'd seen, and knowing that I had to repair something that corresponded to that. I could not continue being who I was or thought I was. I had to consider where I was going to go from there. Almost immediately, I had to go to Paris to do a film that I wasn't sure when I was in India that it was going to happen because I couldn't communicate much. This is the days before cell phones and all. So I had to go back to Paris, but none of the family could go with me. I was on my own. I was filming in Paris for a couple of days on this film. And I ran into Terrence Malick, whom I hadn't seen in years. He was living in Paris, and he was kind of incognito. I saw him on the sidewalk. He lived on the Rue Jacob, and I was staying at a hotel nearby. And we renewed our acquaintance. And I didn't realize, but he's a deeply spiritual man. He was a Rhodes Scholar, and he studied in England, and he spoke like 4 languages, and he had a great interest in spirituality and religion and so forth. And so he began to nurture this need that I was feeling I had to address in deep inside. And he would give me books to read, and we would talk about spirituality. And I remember he had a great fondness for going to these sessions of evangelic youngsters who sang at the church in Paris at night, just with guitar and candle lights. And we would sit in the church there near the place where he lived, and Saint-Germain-des-Prés, the oldest church in Paris. And I began to feel a drawing to something personal. He would, as I say, give me books. The last book he gave me was the Brothers Karamazov, and I couldn't stop reading it. It took about a week, over 1,000 pages, but it was that work that I could not explain, but that touched me so deeply. And the night that I finished it, the next day I had a day off. It was May 1st, 1981. And I thought, okay, this is the day the Lord has made. I'm going to make that journey back to from whence I came. So I walked from the left bank to the right bank to this church that I was familiar with on the Avenue Hoche, just off the Champs-Élysées. And it was the St. Joseph's Church. It was the only English-speaking church in Paris, and I learned later it was the only one in all of France. And that day, I was determined that I was going to reunite with my faith. I walked over, it was about an hour and a half walk to the church, and I pounded on the door because it was locked. I pounded again and again, and nobody responded. So I walked down the steps, and as I landed on the sidewalk, the door burst open, and this priest was standing there, and he had a napkin in his hand. He was chewing. I clearly had interrupted his lunch. He said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh, Father, sorry to bother you, but I've been away for a long time. I'd like to go to confession." He looked at me. It was clear that this is what he did for a living, And he said, "Can you come on Saturday at like 11 a.m.? Is that good for you?" I said, "Yes, I'll be here." He said, "Then don't be late. I have a wedding at noon." And I said, "I won't." And I did. I came back and I went to confession for the first time in many years. And he gave me 1 Our Father as my penance. And I remember saying, I said, "Is that it, 1 Our Father?" He said, "Yes, of course." He said, "We haven't been gone that long that you can't remember the Our Father." I said, No. I said, "I'll take it, I came out of the box and he left, and I sat in that empty church and I wept uncontrollably with joy and relief. I felt like I had finally come home. And it was not the church that I had left. It was a different church, but it was a different me as well. I wanted to come back to the church of activism, where we saw our faith in the streets. I came back to the church of Mother Teresa, to the church of Daniel Berrigan and Phil Berrigan, and the people who were serving the poor and living the gospel and challenging the violence in the world, in our society, in ourselves. And so I wanted to find a way to unite the will of the Spirit with the work of the flesh. And I knew if I could do that I would become myself. I joy in that, and I love my faith, and I don't always agree with the church, and I don't think we should. It's run by men mostly, and they're not always right, but they have sustained this powerful society in our world that is universal, as the word Catholic means, and I love it, and I love our current Pope, and I give thanks and praise for his presence in our lives and in the life of the church every day. I think Francis is such a powerful reflection of the love God has for us. and how our church has become a vessel, a light in the world for peace and justice and mercy and joy. As Emilio said, give thanks and praise.
It's beautiful. I mean, you created such a strong foundation of faith and within your household. And I'm assuming, I think it was your parents, right, that also built that foundation of faith growing up.
Yeah, both of my parents were immigrants. My mother was from Ireland, and my father was from Spain. They were both from little villages, and so they were very similar in nature. And they were immigrants, they met in Ohio. My father was going to what they called immigrant schools in those days to become citizens. And my mother was there as well. They met, they fell in love, and they married in 1927. They had 12 pregnancies, 10 survived, 9 boys, 1 girl, and I'm a 7th son. So I kind of, grew up with a social justice theme. There was no excuse for not responding to the theme that we grew up with, is we serve ourselves best when we serve the least first. And so that's what I've tried to do with my life, is to be aware of where the greatest need is and to respond to it in the deepest part of my being, reflecting my own brokenness with the brokenness that I see. And when I say brokenness, it's really a blessed brokenness, and it's a beautiful, blessed brokenness, because it's really the only way, when we recognize how broken we are, that's the only way God can get in. God can't get in through our ego. We have to be needy. We have to be broken, and we have to see it in each other and realize that that's how God reaches us.
I said that to my wife the other day. I said, I find myself pointing out faults in other people. And what that really is a reflection on what God is trying to fix within me. Yeah. Right? I'm always pointing out something, and I'm like, that's really God's way of saying, this is what you need to work on.
Exactly. This is how God gets in. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So the film opens up on May 16th again, which we're excited. What do you hope, because this is a different audience from 10 years ago to now, but what do you hope the audience or the new audience will walk away with after watching this film? What would you say?
Well, I hope they'll want to walk away and think about walking the Camino to begin with, but also I'm hoping that it will revive an interest in the film, and we'll get a re-release on a regular basis so that the film can be out there in theaters across the country and will be available for people to see on the big screen, which hasn't happened in more than 10 years. That would be ideal.
And do you see a film like this sort of being accepted or being promoted throughout Hollywood?
I think that the things that are important to you, you always have to do on your own. And it shows in the work that you do, the things that you choose rather than are forced to do because you need the dough or you need to keep a public persona, The most important things that we do are reflected in the work. And I don't think there's anything I've ever done that equals the quality of The Way. And if I had to go out with that, if that was the last film I made, that's what I do for a living.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, Martin, it's been honestly a pleasure to chat with you and sort of reconnect. And I look forward to speaking with you again and potentially working together on a project. And we'll be here to promote The Way and hopefully The Way 2. And really, it's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks so much. It's good to see you again, too.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Walk in Faith. Always remember, you have the ability to inspire and evangelize through your words and actions. God bless you.
Tom, your son, I'm so sorry. I had no idea.
I'm going to walk the Camino to Santiago. Both of us.
You don't choose a life, Dad. You live one.
Hey everyone, it's Craig Syracusa. I'm the host of Walk in Faith and also the executive director of this beautiful facility in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. This is only made possible through donations and contributions. And if you'd like to find out more information or ways that you can help us bring the Word of God, help us evangelize, log on to emmausbrooklyn.org for more information. God bless you.